Begin. Alara stood on the rickety wooden dock, a delicate lace parasol twirling in her gloved hand. The air around her smelled of sweet lavender, a stark contrast to the muddy river below and the sharp scent of fish from the barges tied nearby. Her silk gown, the color of a summer sky, brushed against the rough-hewn planks, a tiny speck of elegance in the wild frontier town of Blackwood Bend. Distant shouts from the lumber mill echoed across the water, a constant reminder of the hard work that built this place. Alara had come to this untamed land with her family, clinging to the refinements of her old life even as the wilderness pressed in. But lately, a darker sound had joined the usual frontier noises. Whispers of a new, cruel private prison upriver, called the Iron Jaw. Folks said it was built by a greedy company, and that good, honest workers were being thrown inside for no reason at all. Just yesterday, she'd heard that the entire crew of the River King, a barge known for its fair dealings, had been rounded up. The thought made her stomach churn. These weren't criminals. They were men just trying to make a living. The perfume she wore suddenly felt heavy, out of place, as she realized the true grime of this place wasn't just on the riverbanks, but in the hearts of some men. And begin. The scent of lavender and the soft feel of lace no longer comforted Alara. The injustice of the Iron Jaw prison, where good men were wrongly held, gnawed at her heart. She couldn't simply stand by and do nothing. This wasn't a problem for the men of the town to fix. It was a wrong that needed to be righted, and she felt a fierce, unfamiliar resolve bloom within her. Later that evening, in the quiet of her parlor, a single lamp cast long shadows. Alara's gaze fell upon a velvet box resting on her dressing table. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded blue silk, lay her grandmother's pearls. Each orb glowed with a soft, milky light, holding memories of generations past, of elegant balls and whispered secrets. This necklace was her most treasured possession, a link to a world far removed from the dirt and danger of the frontier. Her fingers traced the cool, smooth surface of the largest pearl. Selling them felt like cutting a tie to her very identity, to the refined woman she had always been. But what good were beautiful things if they couldn't be used for good? What good was her refinement if it didn't stir her to act? The lives of innocent men, trapped in a brutal stockade, weighed more heavily than any family heirloom. She knew, with a certainty that surprised her, that these pearls, meant for beauty, now had a different, far more important purpose. They will buy freedom. And begin. The next morning, Alara tucked the velvet box containing the lustrous pearls into a small, plain satchel. She chose a simple, dark dress, hoping to blend into the rough streetscape. The sweet scent of her usual perfume felt too grand for this errand, so she left it untouched. Her destination was a dusty, cluttered shop near the edge of town, known for dealing in all sorts of goods, from broken tools to forgotten heirlooms. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old wood, rust, and something vaguely musty. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that pierced the grimy window panes. A stooped, whiskered man peered at her over spectacles perched on his nose. "Morning, ma'am. What can I do for you?" he grunted, his eyes assessing her fine clothes with a hint of surprise. Alara carefully pulled out the velvet box. The pearls, even in this dim light, seemed to glow with an inner fire. The old man's eyes widened. After a moment of quiet inspection, he made an offer. It was far less than she knew their true worth, but she wasn't selling for profit. She nodded, accepting, and with some of that, Alara said, pointing to a stack of plain, yellowish sticks on a shelf, "I'll take as many of those tallow candles as that will buy." The raw, animal scent of the candles filled her nose, a dull, earthy smell far removed from her fragrant world of lace and lavender. She left the shop with a heavy sack, not of jewels, but of humble wax and wick, feeling a strange mix of loss and purpose. And begin. With the sack of tallow candles hidden away, Alara turned her attention to the next, more difficult task. She needed an inside man. Whispers around town often mentioned Silas, a guard at the Iron Jaw, a man rumored to be as worn out by life as the prison itself. He wasn't known for being cruel, just tired. Alara knew he frequented a small, smoky tavern at the edge of town, a place she would normally never set foot in. The tavern reeked of stale beer and cheap tobacco. Alara, still in her plain dress, found Silas slumped at a small table in a dimly lit corner. He was a big man, but his shoulders sagged and deep lines etched his face. His eyes, when they met hers, held no spark, only a weary resignation. He looked startled to see a woman like her in such a place. "Silas?" Alara asked, her voice soft but clear above the tavern din. He grunted in response, not bothering to sit up straight. "I understand you work at the Iron Jaw." He nodded slowly. Alara took a deep breath. "I need your help. Good men are held there, wrongly. I'm willing to pay for your cooperation, for you to look the other way for just one night." She pushed a small, heavy pouch across the table. It clinked with the silver coins she'd received for her pearls, a small portion saved for this very purpose. Silas's tired eyes flickered to the pouch, then back to her, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. "And begin." Silas stared at the pouch of silver, then at Alara. A long moment passed, filled only by the tavern's distant murmur. Finally, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of his weary life, he reached out and slowly pulled the pouch closer. "One night, you say?" His voice was raspy, like dry leaves scraping together. "And what exactly do you have in mind, ma'am? The Iron Jaw ain't no simple shed." Alara's heart thumped, a mix of fear and relief. "Just to look away, Silas. To give us a small window. We'll do the rest." He nodded slowly. "All right, but you gotta understand what you're up against. That place is built solid, strong logs sunk deep. The walls are high, too high to climb without a ladder, and the watchtowers are manned all night. There's a regular patrol every hour. The main gate is heavy, bolted from the inside." He paused, his gaze distant. "The men you're after, the ones from the River King, they're in the far block, cells 4 through 7. It's the newest part, not as strong as the old section. And there's a smaller back gate, near the woodshed, sometimes left with just a simple bar, not fully locked if a man was distracted." He looked at her, a glimmer of something almost like concern in his tired eyes. "It's a fool's errand, ma'am, but if you're set on it, that's what you need to know." Alara listened, absorbing every detail, a silent plan forming in her mind. "And begin." Armed with Silas's information, Alara knew she couldn't undertake this dangerous task alone. She needed help, and she knew just where to find it. The river workers, though rough around the edges and smelling of sweat and river water, were known for their strong sense of right and wrong and their loyalty to their own. They knew the river better than anyone, and many of them had friends or family who had sailed with the River King crew. Alara sought out a few of the most respected barge captains and deckhands she knew, men who often shared a friendly nod with her on the docks. She met them in hushed tones, not in taverns, but on the quiet riverbanks at dusk, the sound of the water masking their whispers. She explained the plight of the River King crew, the injustice of the Iron Jaw, and her plan. She didn't hide the danger, nor did she gloss over the fact that she, a woman of fine lace and perfume, was asking them to risk their lives. To her surprise, there was no hesitation, only grim nods of understanding. Old Man Tiber, a burly captain with a weathered face and kind eyes, was the first to speak. "Those boys are good men, Alara, and that Iron Jaw is a stain on this river. We'll help." Others quickly agreed. Young Finn, nimble and quick, the quiet twins Jed and Ben, strong as oxen, and Maggie, a tough woman who piloted her own small skiff, her hands calloused but her heart true. They were a motley crew, smelling of tar and tobacco, but their determination shone brighter than any pearl. "And begin." As darkness fell, a thick, inky blanket over Blackwood Bend, Alara met her small band of rescuers at a secluded bend in the river. Maggie had brought her sturdy skiff, small enough to navigate the narrower channels leading to the prison, yet strong enough for their purpose. Alara, dressed again in her plainest clothes, carefully placed the sack of tallow candles into the boat. The scent of them, earthy and raw, mingled with the damp smell of the river and the faint, lingering aroma of pipe tobacco from men. They pushed off silently. The only sounds are the soft dip of paddles in the water, a gentle, rhythmic lapping against the hull, and the occasional creak of the wooden boat. The river, usually bustling, was quiet now, reflecting the countless stars above like scattered diamonds. Alara sat in the bow, her hands clasped tightly, feeling the cool night air on her face. She could feel the rough texture of the wooden planks beneath her, a stark contrast to the smooth silks and polished floors of her home. Whispers passed between the men and Maggie, quiet instructions about currents and landmarks, low murmurs of encouragement. Alara found herself listening to the steady breathing of her companions, a comforting presence in the vast darkness. The distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of unseen creatures on the riverbank. These were the only interruptions to their solemn journey. The Iron Jaw prison lay ahead, a dark stain on the horizon. But for now, they were simply a small boat, moving with purpose under the watchful eye of the silent night. Begin. As the skiff rounded a bend, a different scent joined the river's dampness, the faint, acrid smell of wood smoke carried on the cool night breeze. It grew stronger with every silent stroke of the paddles, a clear sign they were nearing their destination. Then, through the dense trees lining the bank, Alara saw it. The dark, formidable outline of the Iron Jaw prison, its high log walls looming like a monster in the night. A few dim lights flickered from within, casting weak glows that seemed to make the darkness around them even deeper. The air grew heavy with a sense of dread, but also a fierce determination. Alara gripped the edge of the boat, her knuckles white. This was the place where injustice festered. Just as the thought settled, a voice cut through the stillness, loud and booming across the water. "All's well." The call came from a watchman, perched high on one of the prison towers. It was a practiced, bored cry, meant to reassure, to signify order. But to Alara, it was a hollow lie. All was most certainly not well inside those walls. The sound made her blood run cold for a moment, then hot with resolve. Old Man Tiber exchanged a knowing glance with Maggie, their faces grim in the near darkness. The call would come again in an hour. They had to be swift, precise, and silent. The real work was about to begin. Begin. They beached the skiff silently a short distance from the prison, near the woodshed Silas had mentioned. The air here was heavy with the smell of damp earth and chopped timber. Finn, light on his feet, moved ahead to check the small back gate. A moment later, he gave a soft whistle, the signal. Silas had kept his word. The bar was indeed loose, easily slid aside. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs, but her movements were steady. One by one, they slipped through the narrow opening, entering the grim confines of the Iron Jaw. The darkness inside was profound, broken only by the faint glow from the watchtowers and the distant, rhythmic footsteps of a patrolling guard. Alara reached into her sack and pulled out the tallow candles. With a practiced hand, Old Man Tiber struck a match, and a small flame bloomed, chasing away the immediate darkness. The raw, fatty smell of burning tallow filled the air, replacing the damp earth and wood smoke. Others followed suit, lighting candles and passing them around. The soft, flickering glow danced on their faces, illuminating the rough log walls and the dirt ground. It wasn't the bright, grand light of a chandelier, but a humble, determined illumination that cut through the oppressive gloom. Each tiny flame seemed to push back against the darkness, not just of the prison, but of the injustice it held. They moved like shadows, guided by these small, precious lights, deeper into the heart of the stockade. Begin. Guided by the soft, bobbing lights of the tallow candles, the group navigated the narrow, dirt pathways of the prison yard. The air inside was thick with the smell of stale straw, unwashed bodies, and a faint, metallic tang. It was a place of shadows and despair, where the rough-hewn log walls seemed to absorb all hope. But the humble flames Alara held and that flickered in the hands of her companions pushed back against that gloom, creating small, moving islands of light. They reached the far block, just as Silas had described. Here, the cells were even darker, the air heavier. Alara held her candle high, its weak glow stretching into the blackness of the first cell. Inside, huddled on the floor, were figures. Their faces were smudged with dirt, their clothes ragged, but as the light touched them, a spark of something, surprise, then dawning hope, flickered in their eyes. "River King," Alara whispered, her voice barely audible. A man stirred, his voice hoarse. "Aye, who's there?" The contrast was stark. Alara, refined even in her plain dress, surrounded by the rough, grimy walls, holding a simple candle that illuminated the despair of the prisoners. The light wasn't grand, but it was enough. It showed them the faces of the wrongfully held, the tired eyes and gaunt cheeks of men who had lost their freedom. It was a beacon, a small promise of rescue in a place designed to crush spirits. And begin. With hushed urgency, Alara's companions began working on the cell doors. The heavy iron locks, old and rusty, groaned softly as Jed and Ben, with their immense strength, carefully pried them open. Finn, nimble and quick, helped to silence any creaks or groans. The air, already thick with the prison's foul odors, now had a faint scent of oil and strained metal. As each cell door swung inward, the men inside blinked at the sudden, if dim, light. They were weak, their movements slow and stiff, but a wave of profound relief washed over their faces. Some could barely stand, leaning on the sturdy river workers who gently helped them up. There were no shouts of joy, no loud exclamations, just quiet, grateful nods and whispered thanks. They understood the need for silence, their very lives depending on it. Alara watched, her heart swelling. These men, once proud and strong, were now fragile, their spirit dimmed but not broken. The sight fueled her resolve. Quickly, quietly, the freed workers were ushered out of their cells. Old Man Tiber led the way, his candle held low, guiding them back along the same path they had entered. The group moved like ghosts, a silent procession of hope leaving despair behind. The air outside, though still night-chilled, felt infinitely cleaner, freer. They slipped through the woodshed gate, closing it softly behind them, leaving the Iron Jaw prison and its dark secrets to the night. And begin. As the last of the freed workers slipped through the woodshed gate, Alara and her companions quickly but carefully covered their tracks, smoothing the disturbed earth. The faint smell of tallow candles, now extinguished, still lingered in the chill night air, a ghostly reminder of their daring entry. Just as they began to move stealthily towards where Maggie's skiff was beached, a familiar, booming voice cut through the stillness of the night. "All's well," the watchman's call echoed from the prison tower, carrying across the dark river. It was the same bored, rote call as before, meant to reassure, to confirm that all was in order within the Iron Jaw's walls. But this time, it landed on Alara's ears not as a signal of dread, but as a triumphant irony. The words were a lie, a grand deception carried out unwittingly by the very system they had outsmarted. All was decidedly not well for the Iron Jaw prison, for its cruel masters, or for the injustice it represented. A small, satisfied smile touched Alara's lips, unseen in the deep shadows. The prisoners were free. That simple, powerful truth was a far greater echo than any watchman's call. The raw perfume of victory, mixed with the damp river air, was sweeter than any lavender. They moved quickly now, their steps light, leaving the prison behind to its false sense of security, the silence of the night their accomplice. And begin. The air around the skiff was thick with a new kind of silence as Alara and the freed men boarded. It was a silence of relief, of exhaustion, and of the shared understanding that they were not truly safe until they were far downriver. Maggie, with practiced ease, guided the skiff back into the current. The men from the River King, still a little unsteady, settled onto the rough wooden seats, their faces pale in the faint starlight. The journey back downriver was even quieter than the journey up. The only sounds were the gentle, persistent lapping of the water against the skiff's hull and the rhythmic dip of Maggie's paddle. No one spoke. Words felt too loud, too heavy for the delicate balance of their escape. Alara sat near the stern, watching the dark outline of the Iron Jaw prison shrink into the distance, eventually disappearing entirely behind the dense line of trees. The smells of stale prison air and the acrid smoke of the watchman's fire slowly faded, replaced by the fresh, clean scent of the river and damp earth. The freed men, though weary, occasionally exchanged silent glances of profound gratitude with Alara and her crew. There was a camaraderie forged in the shared danger and triumph. The night was still deep, but a sense of lightness began to replace the earlier tension. They were moving steadily and silently, away from confinement and towards the promise of dawn, their quiet passage a testament to their courage and hope. And begin. A faint blush of pink and orange began to paint the eastern sky, chasing away the last vestiges of night. The river, no longer a dark, ominous path, shimmered with the promise of a new day. The air grew crisp, losing its night chill, and the distant calls of early morning birds replaced the hoot of the owl. Alara stretched her cramped limbs, feeling the stiffness from hours spent huddled in the skiff. She looked down at her hands. They were no longer pristine, but smudged with dirt from the prison yard, a little stained from the tallow, and her once clean nails bore traces of grime. Her simple dark dress was wrinkled and perhaps a little torn in places. It was a stark departure from the immaculate appearance she usually maintained. But as she looked at her dirty hands, a warmth spread through her chest. This grime was different from the pervasive filth of the prison. This was the honest dirt of effort, of action, of having done something truly meaningful. It was a badge of courage, earned not through elegant dances or polite conversations, but through quiet bravery in the face of injustice. She thought of her lost pearls, their cool, smooth perfection. They were gone, but the feeling inside her, the deep satisfaction of knowing those men were now free, was far more precious than any jewel. A soft smile touched her lips. She felt good, truly good. And begin. As the skiff neared the familiar docks of Blackwood Bend, the sun climbed higher, painting the river in shades of gold. The freed men, now fully awake, looked at Alara with eyes full of silent thanks. They were still tired, still bearing the marks of their unjust captivity, but they were free. Their gratitude was a quiet hum in the air, a melody far more beautiful than any music Alara had ever heard in a grand ballroom. Alara's dress, once a smooth expanse of dark fabric, was now a crumpled mess, bearing the creases and dust of her extraordinary night. Her hair, usually perfectly coiled, had escaped its pins and strands fluttered in the morning breeze. She knew that back in her refined world, such disarray would be unthinkable. Her maid would be shocked. Her acquaintances would whisper. But a genuine, wide smile spread across Alara's face, a smile that reached her eyes and made them sparkle in the morning light. She had lost her pearls, her most treasured family heirloom, a symbol of her past. Yet, she had gained something immeasurable. She had gained the knowledge that she could act, that her actions could change lives, and that true value lay not in possessions, but in courage and compassion. The lives of good people, now free to return to their families and their river, were a far greater treasure than any string of pearls. She felt a lightness in her spirit, a sense of purpose that no amount of luxury could ever provide. Her fancy dress was wrinkled, but her soul felt perfectly smooth. And